Hi everyone. So in a recent one of these, a recent one of those, I showed a picture of myself as a toddler wearing Mr. Potato Head glasses, and I talked about spiders. And I showed the Black Widow I'd recently caught. It was in a jar. The whole point of that episode, that video, though, was to say that I usually dislike tropes in fantasy literature, tropes in fantasy media of all kinds, such as huge spiders as enemies. That's why I had a prop. But also in that video, I referenced my aversion to the tropey handling of characters and the tropey handling of magic systems in fantasy. But it was a short, right? I didn't have any time, so I didn't elaborate. I didn't explain either of those things. This isn't a short, though, and so I do have time, so I'll explain both of them now. I'll start with characters. In the management of characters, to me, cliches are just perfume. Most of it is bad in any amount, but there's some tolerable varieties. But even those tolerable cliches, those tolerable perfumes, it is so easy to overdo them. And as soon as I catch a whiff of one of these excesses, I have to leave the room. I have to close them. If it's like a book, I have to close it. If I have to put down the controller or whatever, it's a video game. I think the most obvious example, I'm going to refer to it as the Tolkien effect on dwarves. Everyone knows what I'm talking. In my defense, I understand that like Germanic folklore, predated Tolkien, like Norse mythology predated Tolkien. He just inherited some of it, but he popularized it. He ingrained it in us. That's why I'm calling it the Tolkien effect. And you don't have to you have to like roll 20-sided dice to understand what I'm talking, or like play video games or read books or watch fantasy movies. Everyone already knows that in fantasy genre everything, like 80% of dwarves are mountaineering blacksmiths. And does anybody think, once you put down the dice, put down the controller, close the book, whatever, to stop the movie, does anybody think, just walking around society, that like Peter Dinklage, if he didn't make it in Hollywood, he'd be off in the Himalayas somewhere right now banging away on an anvil? Obviously not. Nobody thinks that. And yet, these biases, they just work their way into our fantasies. It's like a retrovirus. It just reverse transcriptases its way into our fiction's DNA. And I think the same thing is true with magic systems. It's just less, I don't know, maybe culturally sensitive or less ubiquitous or something like this. It's less noticeable. I've talked about this in the past. I've talked about magic systems in the past. I've praised soft magic. I've sort of criticized hard magic systems, but I've never talked about my own magic system. These are my books. Let me put down my drink. Here's my book 1, part 1, Crown of the Caged God. Book 1, part 2. And I'm actually not going to explain the mechanics of it here. Not even in the books do I really, if you've read them, a clever reader can figure out how my magic system works despite me never spelling it out, but I'm not going to spell anything out here. Instead, to talk about magic systems in fantasy, what I'm going to do, let me just philosophically set a scene. I think you'll see why I'm doing this. So pretend like I look out the window and I see a stray cat. I see Pippi. Let's say you look out the window and you see the year 800. It's AD 800 out, or 900 maybe, something like that outside. And you're a Viking, okay? And you get in your little ship, and you're in Kattegat, and you leave Kattegat, you sail for England or wherever, somewhere you're going to raid. And as soon as your ship hits the sand, okay, you look off in the horizon, and what you see is this perfect rainbow just falling into the city you plan to sack, just perfectly marking, like, here is your pot of gold. Go collect this with Violet. Oh, that's magic. That is a magical omen to those Vikings. Now, fast forward the world 800 years. Fast forward the world 900 years. Okay, we've solved the rainbow at this point. Humanity has figured out the mystery of their, like, science has unraveled the omenhood right there. But at that point, there are still 10,000 other natural phenomena that we have no idea, we have no understanding of these things. And a lack of understanding creates room for mysticism. There's mysticism in ignorance. And expelling our ignorance doesn't always enhance the experience of life. Now, I know the most like mundane, boring, dull, shallow thing anyone could say here, and I hear it all the time, is to quote Arthur C. Clarke. Like, oh, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Okay, I understood that on my own in middle school, and I'm not exceptional. Everyone who's ever graduated middle school had that thought on their own. I just don't consider that a deep thought. What I think the difference between magic and technology, the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is mood. Okay, the feeling that those Vikings got. I know this is true. I wasn't there. You weren't there. Nobody was there, but we all know this is true. The feeling that those Vikings would have felt, right, deep in, like inside their insides, when they see that rainbow just like, oh, fallen into that sackable city is very different. That's a different feeling from Descartes and Newton and whatever, as they sort of deciphered the physics of a rainbow. There's a very different feeling there. And the feeling I connect with is fantasy, is magic. The mood of fantasy, the mood of magic is so different from sci-fi, and sci-fi just doesn't ring any of my bells. I mean, I work in the sciences in real life as a professor, as a researcher. You know, I do get a little feeling of excitement in a regression model when I'm doing some prediction analysis of a medical outcome or something like that, and I get a yeah, that's not magic, that's not fantasy, that's totally different. And in literature, in video games, and whatever's, oh, fantasy is what rings my bell. Even though sci-fi has fewer huge spiders in it, and in addition to the fewer spiders, sci-fi has fewer magical schools, but that is a topic for another time. For now, I hope whether it's sci-fi, whether it's fantasy you connect with, that mood is just ringing your bell all day long. Okay, I'll see you next time.